I had physical therapy this morning, but I went to my job afterwards and I was combing through the different media day interviews from the fighters at 317 that we'll be seeing fight this Saturday. I will be releasing a video probably compounding the media day interviews into the press conference as to what I thought about what all the fighters had to say going into the fights. But today I want to talk about some new signs and also some more great fights that the UFC has scheduled. Aside from everything else, how many new names have we seen in the sport? Whether or not they've lasted or just been signed to one fight and gotten cut. The UFC's talent acquisition machine is working in triple time this year, and we're getting all types of new fighters, even if they're not contenders or in some cases deserving of a spot on the roster. We're getting fighters, and if a fight falls through, you better believe that they're going to pull someone up from the regional scene to replace him. And it may be a guy who does have a place in the UFC, and he gets an opportunity to prove it. And I think that's cool, and it's healthy, and it stimulates our sport. Also, before we get started, shout out the gang, Burt MMA once more. He's fighting this weekend, so wish him good luck on any of his pages, Burt MMA 1, 2, or 3. Also, Big Marcel and MMA Orbit, I'm going to be using screenshots from a few of their Instagram posts, so I just wanted to pay credit where credit is due to those guys. So I want to raise attention to the fact that good fighters have been being located and given contracts from regional promotions without going through Dana White's Contender Series, which comes back in August, so get ready for some really brutal knockouts, more hype trains, and overall great performances from guys who may actually do something in the UFC. I like the Dana White Contender Series. Of all the different machines that we have that produce talent, other than different promotions that are co-signed to the UFC like Cage Warriors, which consistently push through prospects that are good, Fury FC is also worth noting too, as I mentioned before. Any MMA organization whose fights are being streamed on UFC Fight Pass, that's a legit fighting organization, most of the time at least. So we have Bantamweight and Featherweight Polish KSW MMA Champions. They're going to be coming to the UFC. The Bantamweight's name is Jacob Wiklax, I think that's how you say it. He's 16, 3, and 2. I was expecting this to be all kickboxing because I saw KSW there, and they're from Poland as well. They do have kickboxing bags on them, but both of them are grapplers. Robert Ruchala is going to be the featherweight. They have differing styles in the sense that the bantamweight I feel is a bit more technical and more directed towards grappling without initiating brawl sequences. He's able to win most of his fights just by being scary and aggressive early, getting in on a single leg and then finishing it, and then just immediately attacking a submission whenever someone's not prepared for it. In the UFC, I don't know how effective this style of immediately taking the back and chasing RNCs is going to be against everyone who knows how to fight the hands. When's the last time that we've seen an RNC be completed on a guy who didn't almost get knocked out seconds before the choke was sunk in? Every single contender in the UFC at this point knows how to hand fight. So if your entire strategy is to take the back without doing a lot of damage on the feet first, I don't think that you're just going to be able to come to the UFC and just bamboozle everyone outside of the rankings and then in the top 15 and then make it into the top 10 just by strictly playing jiu-jitsu. You'll make it about as far as Kron Gracie did. And he's definitely a better striker than Kron Gracie is, but I didn't see a wicked amount of skills out of Jacob Wiklax. Robert Ruchala, though, he fights a lot like Andreas Gustaffson, but he has more technical skill. He has kickboxing skills as well as Jacob Wiklax does, but his game is defensively being sound, catching a kick, getting to a body lock, and then again, getting to the RNC. These guys do have very similar styles of grappling, but their stand-up is a bit different. Ruchala, you're going to find it be a bit more forward pressuring than Jacob Wiklax, who's most of the time will only crash whenever he's planning to wrestle and to get a takedown. Robert Ruchala will get in there to make a fight nasty on the feet and to turn it into a brawl, and then he'll set up the opportunity to wrestle or to take the back in a sequence where a guy is like, okay, yeah, we're just having a bar fight. He forgets that Robert Ruchala is as technical that he is with the grappling. Opponents of Jacob Wiklax just seem to be a bit more tentative towards approaching him in a fight because they know what his plan is going to be. How well they'll do, maybe the rankings. I mean, there are champions in this promotion, but sometimes that really doesn't mean anything at all. If you're a champion from another promotion, you can come to the UFC to compete. It may be safe to put stock in these guys, though, since they're not from Bellator. But however we feel about it, they're here right now. So let's talk about the next pickup that the UFC has made. It's going to be the former PFL champion, Ante Delija. And I'm not sure where to rank the best bases for being a heavyweight. Being fat is one of them. Being muscular is another one. And being Croatian is definitely a category because we've gotten Crow Cop. I think this guy trains out of Crow Cop MMA in that country or wherever his gym is, if it's in America. And then we have Stipe. So these are like the three kings of Croatian heavyweight. And he was a champion in PFL. He did beat Renan Ferreira, which in retrospect, Rizvan Kuniev, this guy, and also Francis Ngannou. I mean, the two of these other guys, Rizvan Kuniev and also Ante Delija, beating up and Ferreira the way that they did before Francis Ngannou really makes me, in retrospect, feel silly for the fact that I actually fear that Francis Ngannou may be too boxing-minded and lose an MMA fight. This guy would have never in a million years beat him. It says there at the bottom that he could be fighting in Paris against top 10 Marcin Tybura. Great fight. I want to see where he places in the division. We're getting ranked fights with new faces, and that's the most important thing. They were calling this guy Croatian Nate Diaz, and I was looking at his fight style, and pretty much, man. So I think he definitely has a place in heavyweight in the UFC. And if he does win against Tybura and the fight is cool, then this is going to be one of the better pickups of the entire year, because we really need heavyweight prospects, and Marcin Tybura is top 10. Lightweight, we have an Octagon champion, Octagon MMA. This is where Andreas Gustaffson came from. I just mentioned him earlier. Shem Rock is this guy's name. He trains with Paddy Pimblett out of their gym, and they both grapple very similarly. This guy is like an ADC grappler, super mega 10th planet wizard. I mean, it's the same thing as Paddy whenever he goes down to the ground, the way that he works his mechanics with arm traps whenever he does body triangles, or he does backpacks as well. That's this guy's entire game, keeping kicks at range. This is a fighting style that's similar to Robert Ruchala or even Jacob Wicklax, who I just described earlier. I think that Shem Rock is definitely a better grappler than both of them. He's a trickier jiu-jitsu specialist, and that counts for a lot in MMA. Against the low-level guys that you would be beating in order to get into the rankings, if you can outsmart them in Brazilian jiu-jitsu on a consistent basis, you're going to be very successful in the UFC. Up until a certain point where you're going to need some striking, but that's going to give you a lot of time to work on that, so that whenever it counts, you can pull out an overhand or an uppercut or a straight punch that you hadn't shown before that you've been working on the whole time. It's very possible that Shem Rock takes this pathway. He comes from a very good camp. I don't know who they'll place him against in his debut, but new lightweights are always fun and exciting, so hopefully this guy delivers. Now we're going to discuss some pretty big fight announcements. I'm very excited for all these matchups that we're going to get into right now. The first one is going to be Gene Silva versus Diego Lopes on UFC Noche. This will happen on September 13th. Gene Silva is like a 2-1 favorite in this matchup, and people are like, watching Diego Lopes max out against Volk the way that he did and just give all that he could and still not win the fight because Volk was just ahead of him in the striking. It was sad because of the aftermath and the videos that it produced, but it was really satisfying for me to watch. Just because if a guy gets out grappled and it just ends up being a smudge lay and pray decision because the dude on bottom can't get out, that's dissatisfying. But if it's a very competitive striking battle the whole time, but a guy convincingly does enough to win over his opponent, that's actually entertaining. And so that's a ceiling that Diego Lopes is either going to need to supersede or he will lose this fight. Because if the same fighter comes out to fight Gene Silva, he's going to get absolutely tricked on it. And I can see it being really nutty for us to watch just because it will be happening to Diego Lopes. This is a dude who's established himself as an actual contender in this weight class. And the fact that Volk won the belt back off of him is meaningful because of things that he had accomplished before he had fought for that title. Gene Silva has the opportunity to come out and paper shred him and make it look silly and emo. In a fight with Diego Lopes, this is a guy who takes himself and his career really seriously, and there's a lot riding on his success, and he knows it and he feels it whenever he loses. Gene Silva has that same pressure, but he doesn't show it at all whenever he fights. He entirely leans into this fighting nerd's persona. His ego swells and he just gets in there and gives crazy performances like he doesn't have anything to lose. In this type of fight, this uninhibited free style where it's like he's fighting on a playground, it's going to make it so Diego Lopes is going to try to force a war out of Gene Silva, but Gene Silva is just going to be catching him with really big shots and pointing at him and sticking his tongue out. And that's just going to make Diego Lopes try even harder to get on the inside. Unless he does catch Gene Silva like he caught Volk in their fight, then Gene Silva is just weird enough to outclass this guy and to do it one-sidedly, I feel like. I don't think this is a very competitive striking matchup. If it is held on the feet and there is no implementation of a wrestling or a jiu-jitsu game, Diego Lopes needs to come out here and wrestle if he wants to have any success in this fight, because Gene Silva is just too weird, he's too scary, and he's too powerful, and he's too fast. His tempo changes are so unpredictable, and there's no way to neutralize him. He's this monster. And Volkanovski is kind of the same way as far as not being able to be neutralized, but he's not as threatening as far as the fear factor. I mean, it could just be because of the fact that he had been knocked out. But even after he had beaten Max Holloway 3 times, Volk wasn't like a scary guy. He was just a dude who you knew that if you challenged, you'd probably beat. Volkanovski at his height is perceived the same way that we view Merab, where it's like he's not going to knock you out cold, but he has a good chance of finishing you in his own way, and at the very least, he's going to masterclass you and prove why he's the greatest in the world. Gene Silva's fights just look fake. They don't even look real. We've never seen a fighter like Gene Silva, and fighters who fight Gene Silva have never seen a fighter like him before, and they get knocked out and they don't even know what the hell is going on. And I think it's going to be a whole lot of this until he hits a certain point where a guy is going to either pull his card or he's just going to get the belt. The next fight that we're going to discuss is going to be Caio Borralho versus Nassourdine Imavov in France on September 6th. Both of these fighters were teased as replacement fighters for Dricus du Plessis. Khamzat Chimaev convinced everyone that he wasn't going to be able to fight at UFC 319, so we were seriously considering letting Caio Borralho fight for a belt. The reason why I'm saying it like that is because his 2 best wins are against Paul Craig and also Jared Cannonier. And that's a guy who's been getting knocked out brutally lately, or dominated in decisions that are boring by Bo Nickel. And then Jared Cannonier, we'll see what he does in his next upcoming fight, but he's hanging on by a thread, it seems, and it's not even his fault. He's 40 years old, and that was a close competitive striking fight until it wasn't. But it was a really nice finish, but it was still a standing finish. Caio Borralho actually did put Paul Craig to sleep. It was a nice knockout there. But look at the things that Nassourdine Imavov has accomplished, dude. Imavov has a win over Buckley at 185. He put it into Roman Dolidze as like an actual contender who people couldn't say anything about because he hadn't taken like a serious loss in the rankings. He beat Jared Cannonier himself, and his knockout was better. Even though I think that might have also been standing too. And then he knocks out Israel Adesanya and also beats Brendan Allen in the middle of all of that. Imavov has had zero hype throughout the years, but he's just continued to win, and he's become undeniable at this point. This is definitely a number 1 contender fight. Nassourdine is going to be at home. Caio Borralho will have the advantage of being from the Fighting Nerds, but they're down 1 member, dude. It's only a trio now. If they pop out with Carlos Prates in Paris, he's going to smoke every single cigarette in that country, and that may be bad vibes for them. I wonder how they're going to start treating him now that he's taken a loss, and it's like super public. Caio Borralho, he's a student of the game, and the reason why he had the type of fight that he did with Paul Craig is because he did actually grapple with him. It's not like he had a game plan to stay away from it. He's seeking to test himself in the strength areas of all of the people that he's fighting against. And I think that's because he's trying to learn and improve. And he's always talking about all these monsters that he's sparring with, including Khamzat Chimaev. And that was like the whole thing, was that boy Caio Borralho had already sparred with Khamzat Chimaev and gotten ragdolled. So Khamzat Chimaev was like, yes, I'll take this fight with you. You're easy work. And it actually would have been. So I'm glad that we're not going to see that. And Imavov is not super close to being Khamzat whenever we consider all different areas of fighting. Their fighting styles are different. But as far as attributes are concerned, I would say that Imavov has a similar level of physicality as Khamzat Chimaev, and that's going to be able to help him out. Where Paul Craig was able to stalemate with Caio Borralho in some positions just because they were of equal stature and frame. Nassourdine Imavov is going to be able to muscle through a few positions, and I think that the striking advantage on the feet is going to go to Nassourdine Imavov in terms of power, and we don't know what type of shape Caio Borralho is going to come back in, because for him being the front runner of that entire Fighting Nerds team, it seems like he's the dude who's fought the less and has shown his face the most in public. So maybe he's just been working super hard, and this would be a very big win for him on away turf as well. So we'll see how this one plays out. Early predictions though, I think that Imavov knocks his ass out. I think that he does it brutally. Middle rounds, like 3rd or 4th. Sergei Pavlovich versus Waldo Cortez Acosta in Shanghai, China. This will be going down in August 23rd. There's a couple other fights that we're going to talk about. Maybe one other one that is going to be happening in Shanghai on August 23rd. And I'm going to just say this right now. Sergei Pavlovich, disappointing what ended up becoming of him after he lost that title shot. I think it's going to surprise us who Waldo Cortez Acosta beats in this division whenever we don't see it going like that. Because I didn't see him beating Spivak, and he beat Spivak. I thought Spivak was going to take him down, and he was going to freaking sub his ass, but it didn't go like that. Spivak was barely even able to put this dude on the cage and keep him there. And he wasn't really able to do that, and that's the reason why he lost, is because he couldn't work his game plan off of that. My boy Sergei Pavlovich, if he can't knock you out, he doesn't have any other tools to win. I would say, as far as offensive threats go, no troll Waldo Cortez Acosta has more offensive weapons and a more diverse skill set than Sergei Pavlovich. Sergei Pavlovich has worse striking defense than Waldo Cortez Acosta. Because Waldo Cortez Acosta, he doesn't really get cracked. We don't see him get hit very hard. And he hasn't been fighting great strikers, but even just weird heavyweight shots that somehow make it through and knock people out, which we see from time to time, it seems like he's kind of immune to that by being so technical. And so technical is relative because we're speaking about heavyweight here. But one thing that we definitely did was overstate how good Sergei Pavlovich is. He is okay, but that loss to Volkov was super sus. The fact that he was able to lose that fight that way and to be outclassed the way that he was. Because Volkov didn't even do anything crazy. It was literally just front kicks and a right hand. And that boy Sergei Pavlovich couldn't get on the inside to just find his boxing range or the mark for an overhand or any of his shots, really. He didn't work the body at all. That boy Sergei Pavlovich, I don't know what he was doing. He might have been punishing Volkov in sparring all those years ago, so he was just trying to recreate those moments again and to force it, but it just didn't work that time. Maybe he got his head screwed on straight, but as a contender, I'm not sure if I believe in him anymore. So I think that Waldo Cortez Acosta is probably going to win this decision, and we're just going to just shake our heads. We're going to face palm and just shake our heads. I wouldn't bet on this. If you guys are like into putting money on fights, don't bet on this, man. At least not on Sergei Pavlovich. I guess $5 on that boy Waldo Cortez Acosta couldn't hurt because he's likely going to be an underdog in this fight. I don't think we're going to see another brutal KO here, though. I'm not sure if Sergei Pavlovich can produce those against guys like Waldo Cortez Acosta. Another heavyweight fight. This is going to be Marcin Tybura versus Ante Delija, which I had talked about before. I want to see Ante Delija come in here and shake some shit up in this division because we really need for a new heavyweight prospect to just pop out of the woodworks and randomly just be a guy who we can count on to give us good fights in this division because the dudes that we're working with right now, there's such a lack of depth in the talent pool that we can't reliably count on any heavyweight to put on a good fight recurringly. The only one is Aspinall, but his fights are like 10 seconds long, and it's not even his fault. It's just, I really wish that we had Justin Gaethje in this division, who we were just like, oh yeah, if that guy fights in heavyweight, he's probably going to produce a very violent fight, or it's going to end in a brutal KO where he wins. It's weird, because Spivak, who just got beat up by Waldo Cortez Acosta, he was a guy who won against Marcin Tybura, and that was the reason why I thought that Waldo Cortez Acosta would lose to Spivak, because I thought that Tybura was at least better than Waldo Cortez Acosta. I think if Cortez Acosta fought Tybura, he'd probably beat him. And if Ante Delija loses to Tybura, he definitely loses to Waldo Cortez Acosta as well. I might take a shot and just be like, you know what? I'm going to fully support Croatian Nate Diaz, and we're going to see how this goes. That France card is going to be fun. September 6th, I'm looking forward to that. Another pretty solid fight that we're going to break down right now is going to be Jared Cannonier versus Michael Venom Page at UFC 319. We got a few good middleweight scraps on this card. On this fight, I'm looking forward to it a lot because we have Jared Cannonier. The word on the street is, though, that they threatened to fire that boy Jared Cannonier if he didn't accept this fight and sign on to fight MVP. And MVP is probably looking at Jared Cannonier, who's going to be a minimum age of 40 by the time that he fights, because he was 40 earlier this year whenever he fought Gregory Rodriguez. Michael Venom Page probably got the call for Jared Cannonier, and his eyes turned into dollar signs, just like Scrooge McDuck. I think that a very violent and brutal knockout can be produced here, just because sometimes Jared Cannonier can prove to be kind of unassuming, and he may freeze up like he did against Israel Adesanya in front of a guy who's going to be emoting and gesturing a ton in front of him and doing very irregular things like MVP likes to do. And whenever the kickboxing sequences start going, he does have vulnerability to taking damage to whenever you incorporate your legs into your offense, like he took against Robert Whittaker, who was able to break his arm just by repeatedly throwing 1-2 high kick, 1-2 high kick, 3-2 high kick, 1-3 high kick. And it was just slapping his guard over and over and over again. I think that Michael Venom Page won't be so spammy in his offense. He'll create openings where he can hit Jared Cannonier, and he'll do this more than Jared Cannonier is able to do it to him, and that's why he's going to win this fight. And I think that there's a very high likelihood of a knockout being produced from this matchup. I'm very excited to watch it. Michael Venom Page is getting up there in age as well. He's going to be like 39 himself, so this is an Unk v Unk matchup, 38 potentially. I like middleweight Venom Page, so I'm going to support him in everything that he does in this division until he retires. Another great middleweight fight that's going to be happening on August 2nd. This is going to be US Vegas Fortnite, UFC Vegas Fight Night 108. On this night, we're going to be watching Azamat Bekoev versus Torrez Finney. And this is like, what is this like? This is like Alex Morono versus Carlos Leal, where it's like we have Alex Morono, and you've been good to... this is different, though, because Alex Morono, at one point, he was actually a contender, and he was gatekeeping just outside of the rankings, Alex Morono was. And this was his send-off, because they gave him this big, juiced-up Brazilian to fight who knocked him out. In the case of Alex Morono, I feel this was kind of done out of respect. In the instance of Torrez Finney versus Azamat Bekoev, this is them leading a lamb to a slaughter. There's an overlap and match. They have mutual opponents, not shared opponents, but mutual opponents. Robert Valentin, he fought with Ryan Loder, and Ryan Loder beat Robert Valentin. Ryan Loder fought Azamat Bekoev. Azamat Bekoev knocks out Ryan Loder. Robert Valentin loses that fight and fights with Torrez Finney. Torrez Finney beats him in a horrible decision. And we're all mad at Torrez Finney because he put on such a bad fight. And it looks like the UFC is mad at him too because of the fact that they would even suggest a name like Azamat Bekoev. Which, I mean, I guess if we're getting down to the nitty-gritty of things, you can't be sheltering guys who actually make sense in the rankings for them to fight each other on the basis of ability. This is the UFC just fucking around for a little bit before they get serious with their plans to chase Bekoev towards the belt. Because they want to get rid of Torrez Finney and they want to get Azamat more hype. So why not let him brutally knock out Torrez Finney on this fight night card and just have the clip be shared all over the internet? And I kind of get it. It's hard to even say that there's other fights for him too, just because middleweight is another one of those divisions where there's not a whole lot going on. We need more signs from other promotions in middleweight because there's just not really a lot happening there. But what we do have is pretty good. Marco Tulio versus Michel Pereira in Shanghai again on August 23rd. Marco Tulio, this is my boy. I invested early into this hype train. I actually have a YouTube short on my channel. It's the most recently uploaded one. I just uploaded it just so that there's a recorded account that I was on this hype train before it became cool. Because he had a hand surgery, Marco Tulio did, and he hasn't been fighting after his win over Tresean Gore. I think a lot of people have probably forgotten about that by now, regrettably. But if he was even able to take this matchup a month ago, because he never got that hand surgery, he would have so many more fans now. And I feel like this matchup, whenever it comes up, people are going to see Marco Tulio on their screen and they're going to be like, oh yeah, that guy. And yeah, that guy, he's freaking amazing. And he's everything that we really thought Michel Pereira was going to be. He doesn't do the backflips and stuff, but as far as being an explosive and dynamic kickboxer who finishes fights, Marco Tulio seems like he can do that more consistently than Michel Pereira can. It's just the grappling, so that needs to be tested. But he's shoot-a-box, so it's not like they're not doing jiu-jitsu in there. That's a large reason why I actually do like him, is because he's a shoot-a-box middleweight, and predominantly that camp is comprised of a bunch of flyweight fighters. So it's good that they have a larger weight fighter who maybe not front-running for them, but he's doing things that matter. So I'm rooting for him. A guy who I wasn't really sure if I'd root for or not, but in this fight, it just is too favorable for him stylistically. Rinat Fakhretdinov versus Andreas Gustaffson in Paris. Rinat is a guy who robbed Carlos Leal, and then against Nicholas Dalby, a lot of people felt like he didn't win that fight either. He's going to be fighting a guy who, this is the perfect style for him to win by robbery again, because Andreas Gustaffson, how close of a fight did he have with Chaos Williams? I mean, it wasn't close, but there was a lot of opportunities for Chaos Williams to do things that he just didn't do. And Rinat Fakhretdinov will reach into the well in that third round whenever he's completely tired and pull out a right hand that may change the course of this fight. Because that's just the type of guy that he is. He's a robbery merchant. So if you do leave that option on the table for him, like Andreas Gustafsson does, with such a brawl-heavy style, then he's probably going to take the path of least resistance against you and just wrestle where he can. Be the nail in moments where you're expending more than he is and he's not taking damage, and then just win the important parts. And that's his entire game, or not. And that is if you're not at a grappling level where you can't just muscle you like you did against Brian Battle. So that's always going to be an open option to him. We saw that Andreas Gustafsson is pretty sturdy in the clinch, but Rinat Fakhretdinov does a lot of his best work there. I don't know if I see him getting pressed to the cage with an underhook by Andreas Gustavsson for 3 rounds until he loses. He deserves to. Lord knows it, he deserves to. The way that he's just been robbing these fighters in broad daylight. But I just don't think it's going to happen. Another fight happening at UFC Vegas Fight Night 108. Danny Silva versus Kevin Vallejos is going to be going down. Danny Silva, this is a dude who beat Josh Kulabau. This was an Australian prospect at featherweight who they were trying to build up on these Volkanovski cards. Lerone Murphy, Ricardo Ramos, and then Danny Silva in the middle of this 3-fight skid for Josh Kulabau was whenever Danny Silva was able to beat him. He made him no longer a prospect. So maybe he'll do the same thing to Kevin Vallejos. The reason why people care about Kevin Vallejos a lot is because he actually does box very similarly to Ilia Topuria. It's the style of boxing where heavy cage pressure, and then he gets going with the jab, and he drops the straight to the body and combos off of that. A lot of fighters will combo off of hooks to the body. They'll throw a lead hook to the body. Maybe sometimes they'll throw a rear hook to the body and come up high with a lead hook. Certain boxers, they prefer to get in close and then work their jabs and then drop the straight onto the body to work the hooks in close after then. And that straight punch to the body probably matters so much. I know it does from the fact that I've sparred and hit people with that shot and have been hit with it. Kevin Vallejos places it really well. So what you end up seeing is these 4, 5, 6, 7 punch combo flurries that look kind of like Topuria's, where he's pinning you to the cage, jab, maybe a hook, straight to the body, comes up with a lead uppercut, rear hook, lead hook, straight uppercut, and you're just dead. And like the punches come really fast. Maybe he'll go back downstairs as well. He does have some really nice body shot clips where there's just water in the basement gameplays. So basically, we have a guy like Danny Silva who's good at a lot of different things. He's going to be fighting Kevin Vallejos, who's a very good boxer. I believe in the boxing of Kevin Vallejos. We need more fighters who have explosive KO power to rise to stardom. And he's young, so he can develop into a very great fighter, if he is who he's projected to be. So putting stock in him is probably a good idea. This is actually a test for him, and not a layup. The next fight is going to be some unk-on-unk violence. King Green versus Diego Ferreira at UFC 319. Man, I don't know how this one goes, because Diego Ferreira, before he beat Mateusz Rebecki, knocked out Michael Johnson. And to be fair, I think that King Green would probably knock out Michael Johnson too. It's just hard to say if he'd win a fight against a dude like Mateusz Rebecki. And that was a really good win by Diego Ferreira that he scored not too long ago. I mean, he has lost a fight since then. It was against Grant Dawson where he got dominated, but I mean, it happens. And I mean, the scheduling, it does make sense now because he got masterclass by Grant Dawson, Diego Ferreira, and King Green one-shot KO'd Grant Dawson. So this may be a textbook example of why MMA math is so unreliable, because based off of what I just said right now, that does indicate that King Green knocks out Diego Ferreira, and he does it by looking at him before the fight even starts. He just passes out because he was able to do it with one shot against Grant Dawson, and it may have been a jab. No, it was definitely a left hand from southpaw. I'm always excited to see what King Green is going to do at this point because he's taken some spills. We've had some good times, like at UFC 300, where he beat up Jim Miller. It was fun. It was a historic moment for the sport because it was a historic event. You're going to look back at that card, you're going to see that fight and be like, oh yeah, do you remember whenever King Green turned Jim Miller's face into a water fountain? And then you're going to ask your friend, he's going to be like, yeah, that was cool. Hopefully we're still in this era, and I want to see it happen. I'm going to select King Green to win this fight, and it has to be by knockout because I don't know if he technically outskills Diego for 3 rounds. But the hood style is a tried and true method, so let's see if it can put on. And that's going to leave our last fight, Kevin Holland versus Daniel Rodriguez at UFC 318. That boy Kevin Holland wasn't lying. He's really after the easiest fights at welterweight. He got on the mic and he said, I want the easiest fight at welterweight, so that's why I'm calling out Colby Covington. And at the same time as Joshua Van getting fight news announcement, he was tweeting that like he also had signed something too, and this is what he was talking about. And it makes sense for him to be like, yeah, I just want easy fights. Fighting down the rankings, I think that Daniel Rodriguez is placed below him there. Kevin Holland is a guy who, he knows what he wants. He knows what he wants. He doesn't want belts, he just wants some money. And these are free paydays. So it's not fair for anyone, even including myself, to want more for him than he wants for himself. I'm not saying that to demean him either. It's just like, what am I doing projecting dreams onto him that I'm not willing to go chase myself? That makes me a weirdo. One thing for certain is that this dude is a crazy offensive threat on the feet at welterweight. He can knock out a lot of these guys because he's there as a guy with a middleweight skeleton. He has a light heavyweight skeleton, man. So he probably chins Daniel Rodriguez, and it's probably uneventful. It's going to happen on the same card as Dustin Poirier versus Max Holloway. So that's going to be my little review of all the different matches made and the different fighters who have been signed to the UFC over, I would say, the last 2 or 3 weeks it's been. I'm going to be releasing content covering the UFC 317 press conference, so keep an eye out for that. Please do like, comment, and subscribe. I'm going to catch you fellas in the next one.